I found my wife's secret dealership and discovered she secretly embezzled over $300, $0 from her own family's estate to fund her affair. Then she filed for divorce and is fighting me over the $1.2 million inheritance we inherited, claiming she owns half of it based on a shady will she forged. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling a story like this, but I guess life has a way of throwing punches when you least expect it. It all started with what seemed like a normal day, but then I stumbled onto something that turned my entire world upside down, something I could never have imagined. The thing is, my wife always seemed perfect on the surface. She was beautiful, sharp-tongued, and she knew how to keep everyone charmed, especially her family. But behind the scenes, things were rotten, and I didn't even know it. It all began when I decided to finally take a closer look at her recent behavior. She'd been acting weird for months, secretive, distracted, and unusually defensive whenever I asked about her whereabouts. I chalked it up to stress at work or some girl drama she wouldn't share. But then I noticed something odd. Her phone always had a new passcode, and she'd hide it whenever I tried to look. She'd get defensive, snap at me, accuse me of snooping, which I wasn't even planning to do. Still, I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something was off. One night I was cleaning up the house after dinner and her phone buzzed. I casually glanced at it and a message popped up from someone named Jake. The message was flirty, something about meeting up later and a wink emoji. My stomach clenched. I didn't even need to read more, I just knew. But I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I decided to dig deeper quietly. A few days later, I found myself in her office, going through her emails, something I'd never done before. I was just looking for signs of stress or anything unusual, but what I found was way worse. There, buried in her sent folder, was an email chain with her supposed best friend, Lisa. They'd been talking about covering their tracks and making sure no one finds out. The last email was from thanking Lisa for helping her manage everything. I was confused. Manage what? I had no idea what I was about to uncover would be so devastating. Then I remembered her mentioning her family estate more often lately, talking about how she was handling some important business for her parents. I'd always thought she was just being responsible. Turns out she'd been embezzling money from her own family's estate, over $300, $0, funding her affair with Jake, her lover. I couldn't believe it. All that money stolen from her own blood relatives just so she could keep her secret life alive. And I found out she'd been lying about everything, her trips, her business meetings, her sudden cash flow. My mind raced. I started piecing things together. Her sudden interest in luxury cars, she'd been secretly buying and selling dealership parts, even setting up a side business behind my back. I found receipts for cars she'd bought for herself, and when I checked the dealership, I saw her name on the ownership documents. She'd been running a secret dealership, secretly funding her affairs, and using the stolen money to keep her lifestyle afloat. It was like a bad movie, but it was real. Then I discovered her filing for divorce, without telling me, claiming I was abusive and unfaithful, all based on her forged will, which she'd created to claim half of the $1.2 million inheritance we'd inherited from my grandmother. She had forged the will, claiming she was entitled to half because she was cohabiting with me long enough. I found the forged documents hidden in her safe, and the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. She was not only cheating on me but also trying to steal from my family's legacy. I felt numb. My wife, the woman I loved, was a liar, a thief, and a cheat. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't even breathe properly. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it earlier. How did I miss all the signs? How could she lie so easily? I was furious, heartbroken, and confused all at once. I wanted to confront her then and there, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. I needed a plan. I needed to make her pay for what she'd done. That night I sat alone in the dark, staring at the evidence, her emails, the forged will, the bank statements. I felt a strange mix of rage and despair. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. I had to decide whether to fight for the marriage or cut my losses. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she'd stolen, emotionally and financially. I had to find a way to reclaim what was mine and make her face the consequences. Little did she know, I was already planning my next move. The more I dug into her financials and her secret dealings, the angrier I got. I'd always been a straightforward guy, honest, and I never imagined could be capable of this level of deception. It was like discovering a stranger. She'd been playing me from the start, and honestly, I felt stupid for not noticing sooner. But now I had proof, hard, undeniable proof, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. That weekend, I decided to confront her. I wanted to hear her lie, see her squirm, and most of all, catch her in the act if she tried to deny everything. I called her into the living room, acting calm but with a simmering anger underneath. She was dressed provocatively, as usual, trying to look innocent, I guess, and she threw me that bitchy smirk when she saw I wanted to talk. I could tell she sensed something was up, but she tried to brush it off. I pulled out the evidence, screenshots of her emails, the forged will, the bank statements showing the stolen money, and I laid it all out. Her face went pale for a second, then she immediately started lying. "You're crazy," she snapped, crossing her arms. "You're just jealous because I've been busy with work and family stuff. You're imagining things, or maybe you're just insecure." That's when I saw her real face, selfish, manipulative, and completely unrepentant. I pressed her harder. "So all those late nights, secret phone calls, and money missing from the estate, that's just coincidence?" She scoffed. "You don't know what you're talking about. I've been doing everything for this family, and you're just making accusations because you're insecure. Maybe you're the one cheating, huh? Maybe you're the one hiding something." That was her typical deflection: blame me, accuse me of betrayal to cover her own tracks, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I knew about her affair with Jake, how she'd been funneling estate money into their secret accounts, and how she'd forged that will to get her hands on my inheritance. Her eyes widened and she started to panic. That's when her facade cracked. She yelled, "You don't understand. I had my reasons. This was all for us, for our future. You're just too blind to see it." She tried to cry, to look innocent, but her tears were fake. I could see right through her. I felt a mix of rage, disappointment, and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she betray me, her own family, and everything we built? I felt betrayed in a way I never thought possible. I'd been faithful, honest, and straightforward, and she'd been secretly screwing around, embezzling, forging documents. The betrayal hit me hard. I realized I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. I'd loved her, trusted her, and she'd used me as a pawn for her schemes. After the confrontation, she stormed out of the house, screaming about how she was entitled to what she wanted, how I was just a naive fool, and how she was going to win in the end. I watched her leave, feeling numb. My mind was racing with questions. What's next? How do I stop her? How do I make her pay? I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed help, legal help, financial advice, maybe even someone to expose her. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything: her lies, her sneers, her fake tears. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. And now I was left picking up the pieces of my shattered trust. I kept thinking about the money she'd stolen, the lies she told, and the fact that she'd filed for divorce, claiming I was the bad guy. That was her way of escaping responsibility, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I was done being the victim. I was going to fight back, no matter what it took. The next morning, I started making calls. Lawyers, forensic accountants, anyone who could help me unravel her web of lies. I knew this was just the beginning, had always been cunning, but I was determined to outsmart her. I wasn't going to let her walk away with my inheritance, my reputation, or anything else she thought she could steal. I had to take control now, or she'd keep ripping me apart from the inside. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about money or betrayal anymore. It was about standing up for myself and making sure she paid for what she'd done. After I gathered the initial evidence, I knew I had to be strategic. Was smart, too smart. She'd been playing her game for years, and I had to outthink her if I wanted any chance of getting justice. I reached out to a lawyer I found through a recommendation, someone who specialized in financial crimes and family law. I explained everything, from her embezzlement to the forged will and her affair with Jake. The lawyer listened carefully, then told me I had a strong case to contest the divorce and reclaim what was rightfully mine. While I was working on that, I also hired a forensic accountant. I needed someone who could trace every penny she stole, see where the money went, and figure out exactly how much she'd embezzled. It was shocking to see how deeply she'd buried her tracks, multiple accounts, offshore accounts, and secret investments. I was stunned. I'd always thought she was just a little ambitious, but this was outright theft on a massive scale. Over $300, $0 gone just like that, and from her own family's estate. That betrayal cut deep, but I knew I had to keep my focus. Meanwhile, kept playing her side. She filed for divorce, claiming I was abusive and unfaithful. Again, her typical move to shift blame. She also insisted she owned half of the inheritance because of that forged will. She even hired her own lawyer, a slick guy who seemed more interested in dragging things out than actually resolving anything. I could tell she was trying to buy time, probably to see if she could drain more money or find a way to minimize her losses. I was furious about her manipulations, but I kept my cool. I knew that patience and facts would win in the end. One night, I decided to confront her again, this time directly. I knew she'd be at her parents' house. She'd been hiding there, probably trying to regroup. I showed up unannounced, and she answered the door with that smirk again. I didn't waste time beating around the bush. I know about the affair, the stolen money, and that forged will. I know everything, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. Her face twisted, anger, panic, and defiance flickered across her features. She started lying again, spinning tales about how she was doing everything for us, how she needed the money to protect her family's estate, and how I was just jealous because I couldn't handle her success. I cut her off. You've been lying from the start. You're a thief, a liar, and a cheat. You've been screwing around behind my back, stealing from your own family and trying to steal my inheritance with that fake will. You're not the victim here. You're the criminal. Her eyes flashed with rage. She spat back, "You don't understand anything. I did everything for us. You're just too blind to see it." That's when I realized how deep her delusions went. She truly believed her own lies. She thought she could get away with everything because she was smarter than everyone else. But I wasn't about to let her. I told her I'd be taking legal action, that I had evidence enough to expose her and fight her in court. Her face darkened and she threatened me, saying I'd regret it. But I knew I was on the right side of this. Over the next few weeks, I pushed forward with everything, filing legal papers, freezing her accounts, and preparing to challenge her claims. I also hired a private investigator to follow her around, just to confirm her whereabouts and any new developments. It was clear she was panicking, trying to cover her tracks, but I was one step ahead. Every day, I felt a mix of rage and relief. Relief that I was finally taking control, and rage that she'd betrayed me so completely. I kept thinking about how she'd lied all these years, how she'd manipulated her own family, and how she'd used her beauty and charm to hide her true nature. One particularly startling discovery was a series of emails between her and Jake, proof that they'd been planning their escape, their life together, funded by stolen estate. Money, I saw plans for a new house, expensive cars, and even a joint account where they'd been funneling cash. That was the moment I knew I had enough to destroy her case and expose her for good. I gathered everything, ready to present it in court. Honestly, the emotional toll was draining. I felt betrayed, angry, and hurt, every part of my trust in her shattered. I kept asking myself how someone I loved so deeply could become this person. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, had turned into a con artist and a cheat. But I also realized I couldn't let her win, not this time. I was determined to fight for what was mine, to make her face the consequences of her actions, no matter how long it took. I was done being the naive husband. This was war, and I was ready to win. The legal process moved quickly once I had all my evidence lined up. I knew was trying to spin her story, but the truth was plain and ugly. I filed a formal dispute over the inheritance, challenging her claim to half of the estate. I also pushed to have her financial accounts audited to verify the extent of her embezzlement. The court date was set and I could feel the tension rising. Of course, kept up her act, bitchy, manipulative, throwing tantrums, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I was a jealous, insecure husband. But I knew better. In the meantime, I started to piece together her entire scheme. The secret dealership she'd set up, the offshore accounts, the forged documents, all of it was coming to light. I hired a forensic investigator to trace the money she'd stolen, and the results were staggering. She siphoned over $300, $0 from her own family's estate, funneling it into her secret accounts and using it to fund her affair with Jake. That was the real reason she'd been so secretive about her finances. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was stealing from her own blood relatives. The emotional toll of this realization hit me hard. I'd always believed in family, in loyalty. And here she was, betraying her parents and her siblings for her own selfish needs. I felt sick. And yet, I couldn't let her get away with it. I was determined to expose her, to bring her down and reclaim what was rightfully mine. I knew that if I didn't act fast, she'd try to spin things her way, maybe even destroy evidence or manipulate the court. One day, I got a call from my lawyer. The judge had ordered her to produce all financial records, and the forensic accountant had uncovered even more hidden accounts. I was stunned to find out that she'd been planning to move large sums abroad, probably to offshore accounts she controlled. I also learned she'd forged that will, claiming she was entitled to half of the inheritance because she'd cohabited with me long enough. The forged documents were in her safe, and I had proof that she'd faked signatures and altered legal wording. Now things were heating up. Was starting to panic, trying to call me, send fake apologies, and even threaten me with more lies. She kept insisting she loved me, that everything she did was for us, but I knew better. Her words were hollow. I could see her desperation in her eyes, and it made me more determined. I wasn't going to let her get away with her schemes, not anymore. The court hearing was intense. She sat across from me, her lawyer whispering in her ear, trying to spin her story. I presented all my evidence, her emails, the forged will, the bank statements, the offshore account details. I laid out her entire scheme, how she'd been embezzling money, cheating on me, and trying to steal the inheritance. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. It was clear she was guilty. Her lies, her manipulation, her entire facade crumbled under the weight of the truth. During the proceedings, tried to claim I was abusive and unfaithful, yet again. She accused me of trying to ruin her reputation, of being jealous and controlling. I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and pity. She was so caught up in her lies that she didn't even realize how transparent she'd become. I told the court about her affair, the embezzlement, and the forged documents. I also introduced the evidence of her secret dealership and offshore accounts. It was all there, irrefutable. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in my favor. The forged will was invalid, and her claim to half the inheritance was. The court ordered her to return the stolen money, and her assets were frozen. She was furious, screaming and crying, but I felt a strange sense of relief. Justice was finally being served. I knew she'd try to appeal or fight back, but I also knew I'd won the battle. The truth had come out. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt exhausted but victorious. I'd fought for everything, my marriage, my inheritance, my dignity, and I'd come out on top. His true nature was exposed for everyone to see. She was a manipulative, selfish woman who'd lied, cheated, and stolen her way through her life. And I was done being her victim. I realized that sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to find the strength to rebuild. I learned a lot about trust, betrayal, and resilience through this nightmare, and I know now that I'll never let anyone manipulate me again. The aftermath is still unfolding, but I'm finally starting to breathe again, knowing I did what I had to do. After the court's decision, life didn't suddenly go back to normal, but I felt a weight lift. Still, the aftermath was messy. Wasn't going down without a fight. She refused to accept the ruling, hired her own lawyer, and started dragging things out even more. She kept claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I was jealous, that everything was just a big misunderstanding. But I knew better. I had the evidence, and I wasn't about to let her twist everything to her favor. The real shocker came when I discovered she'd gone ahead and filed a new lawsuit claiming she owned half of the estate because of that fake will. She argued that she'd been cohabiting with me long enough and that she deserved a share. She even forged some new documents to support her claim, thinking she could manipulate the system again. I was stunned. How far was she willing to go? I had to be prepared for a long fight, but I was already tired of her lies and games. I decided I needed to get ahead of her. I hired a team of private investigators to dig into her recent activities. It turned out she'd been secretly meeting with her lawyer, planning more ways to spin her story and drag things out. She'd also been trying to contact her family, trying to get them to support her narrative. I knew she was desperate, but I also knew I had to stay calm and strategic. If I let her push me into reacting emotionally, she'd win. Meanwhile, I started to focus on rebuilding my life. I took some time off work, traveled for a few days to clear my head, and spent quality time with my kids. The betrayal had shaken me, but I knew I had to stay strong, for their sake as much as mine. I also reached out to a therapist to help process everything. Trusting had been my biggest mistake, but I was learning to move on one step at a time. I realized that forgiveness wasn't the goal, getting justice was. One evening, I got a call from my lawyer. His new claim was dismissed, her forged documents were exposed, and her attempt to claim half the estate was invalid. The judge confirmed that the original will which I had in hand was legitimate, and her forged version held no weight. It was a huge relief. I finally felt like I was closing a chapter on this nightmare. But I also knew wouldn't just accept defeat quietly. She'd continue fighting, probably trying to find loopholes or new ways to manipulate the system. That's when I decided I had to take control of my future. I filed for a protective order against her, citing her aggressive behavior and attempts to intimidate me and my family. I also made arrangements to secure my assets and ensure she couldn't drain them again. I wanted peace, but I knew I'd have to stay vigilant. Was capable of anything at this point. She'd already crossed so many lines. Looking back, I realize how much this ordeal changed me. I used to believe in love and trust, but now I see how dangerous it can be to give someone that much power. This betrayal taught me to be more cautious, to verify, and to protect myself and my family. I'm still healing, still trying to rebuild what I lost: trust, stability, that sense of security. But I'm also stronger now. I learned I can survive even the worst betrayals if I stay focused and refuse to be a victim. Now I'm slowly moving forward. I've started dating again, cautiously. I still have scars, but I refuse to let her win entirely. The whole experience has been a brutal lesson in human nature, greed, and deception. If there's one thing I want others to take from this, it's to trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. And when someone shows you who they truly are, believe them. Because I learned the hard way that sometimes the people you love the most can turn out to be your biggest enemies. Now that everything's settled, more or less, I spend a lot of time reflecting on how I got here. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the guy sharing a story like this. But life has a way of breaking you down and then building you back up, even if it's in a different shape than before. I've come to realize that trust is fragile, and when it's broken, it leaves scars that take a long time to heal. But I also learned that resilience, patience, and a clear mind can help you come out stronger. Looking back, I see how lies and schemes almost consumed me. Her greed, manipulation, and betrayal were staggering, but I refused to let her destroy everything I'd worked for. I fought for my inheritance, for my reputation, and most importantly, for my own peace of mind. The legal battle was exhausting, but it was necessary. It exposed her for who she truly was: selfish, deceitful, and willing to do anything to get what she wanted. I think the biggest lesson I've taken away is that you can't ignore the warning signs. I ignored my gut for too long, trying to see the good in her, hoping things would get better. But sometimes people reveal their true colors over time, and you have to listen. Trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, even if it means breaking away from someone you once loved deeply. Because betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you who you really are. Now I'm focused on rebuilding my life. My kids are my priority, and I want to give them a sense of stability and honesty that try to take from us. I've learned to set boundaries, to be cautious, and most of all, to value myself. I still feel the sting of her betrayal every now and then, but I remind myself that I'm not the same person I was before. I've been tested, and I've survived. For anyone out there going through something similar, trust your judgment. Don't let anyone manipulate or lie to you for too long. Stand your ground, gather the facts, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Sometimes, the hardest lessons are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. What I've learned is that even in the darkest moments, there's a way to find light if you're willing to face the truth and do what's necessary to protect yourself and your loved ones. In the end, I'm grateful I found the strength to confront the betrayal. It's cost me a lot: trust, money, heartbreak, but it's also given me clarity. I know now that I deserve honesty and loyalty, and I hope that sharing my story might help someone else see the warning signs before it's too late, because no amount of love or hope is worth losing yourself over. Trust is earned, not given, and once it's broken, it's up to you whether you rebuild or walk away. I chose to rebuild, and I'm finally starting to feel like I'm moving forward.